The LME MCOs now have rate setting authority under this waiver, so they're not stuck with the fee schedule under fee-for-service Medicaid rules. The B waiver, again, supports all of the behavioral health services, so it's going to be substance abuse services, which are the other policies under the Medicaid website in the 8 range, 8A, 8B, 8C, because yours is what, 8? So your IDD, your HCBS services are going to be under 8P, but there's a slew of other behavioral health services that are out there. And then again, it's coming under the B waiver. And people on the C waiver are eligible for these services because again, they're also on the B waiver.
No, I'm very confused about what he's talking about now.
May I ask a question about
the B part of the waiver
Okay,
instead of
so
the C part of the waiver.
the MCOs set their
Because
rates.
it's combined
They can.
waiver,
Because
the
the
B
state
part
asks
allows us
oversight of the
to limit the
MCOs,
provider network.
whatever rate is paid that is
The
equally.
C waiver is our role in community-based
We do not
services.
compare them to the other MCOs,
Because
but
the
what
B
we are
part
required to do in our report back to CMS is show that our waiver is fiscally responsible and sound.
But then
So
B
whatever
part,
we
because
do would not
prior
exceed
to
what
having
fee-for-service would have been.
MCOs,
Because if you look at basic managed care principles, I mean, even if you look internationally, France and Spain are number 1 and 3 on the list of length of life and quality of life years, and they have national health care. Your doctors still go to your home there. They're broke. They're trying to figure out some other way of financing their system. Some of your other countries like Canada and England, you know, they also have national health insurance, but they supplement it with private insurance policies. Because they also can't afford it. We are number 1 in the United States in terms of technology, but we're much further down on that quality of life list because people can't afford the healthcare technology. And, you know, conversely, you have people that have free healthcare but die of breast cancer because they can't get a mammogram for 6 months. So, you know, it's an international sort of problem. And the way we're dealing with it here in the United States is that when we have these waivers, especially in the Medicaid population specifically, we have to show that it's cost effective. We're all trying to figure out how to do it out of a limited pot. And those waivers have to be shown to be fiscally effective. So, you know, we're still dealing with a limited pool of money, and hopefully as we go forward and improve this waiver, that's one of the things we'll figure out how to do to make that pot more effective.
But I assume that it's based on the conditions, whatever reason
Yeah.
the state is,
Because we'll be
they
back
pay
on the
more or
31st.
less.
Yeah, we'll be back on the 31st.
And they should, and that's part of the reason why we went with this PIP model, because we have an additional waiver in the B waiver. So the B waiver allows for the closure of the provider network. North Carolina is unique in many ways, but unique in their B waiver as well, and that typically you have to have a choice of plans. You don't just have one entity that covers a geographical area. There should, you know, you have, so we got a waiver from that as well, because we said we were going to go with this LME model, and it was going to be able to be closer to the health on the ground, if you will, and figure out what those different areas need, and figure out what differential rates might be for different services, because there is so many regional variation in spending and where the providers are. So, but yes, we do have oversight of what those rates are, that they be fiscally sound. Probably more than you really wanted to know.
That's helpful information.
But, so, the other thing that you hear a lot about, another buzzword, I guess, is the B3 services, and what the B3 is, B3 literally is the B waiver. You know, clause 3 is that the savings, any savings realized from the waiver can be used for additional services. And those services that we have chosen, and these do have to be statewide, so this cannot have geographical variations. These are the ones that we've chosen: the supportive employment, respite, physician consultation. There is the capacity to have an innovation lookalike slot, and then community guide. And these are all available to people on Medicaid people on the wait list under this B3 category. And what we've done, the way since Cardinal was the pilot since 2005, they didn't have these when they went live. They had to achieve savings, and we figured out what the B3s were going to be. What we've done for the rest of the state, what we got permission to do, is offer these under potential savings as opposed to realized savings. So we can tweak these in the waiver in theory. We have to go through a lot to get permission. If we were going to add any additional ones, we would have to show additional realized savings to be able to achieve that. Does that make sense?
All the LMCs are supposed to get the next in the year. However, they don't have projected costs, so they may or may not be able
But they have to provide these. These are built into their current rates. But to add any or,
Is there not already in that feature?
I'm sorry, say it again.
There's not already a term established, like that.
Because they have billing codes. Is that what you're asking me? I might be stupid. I'm not picking it up.
If they want something brand new and different, they can't do that.
Well, that's a good question. Glad you asked. There is another option in the B waiver for what we call in lieu of or alternative services. So they can create an alternative service definition, but that gets a little trickier to sneak past CMS. You have to show what service it's in lieu of and how it's going to be more cost effective for that service. So there is some monitoring and responsibility around that. And, you know, you can't just have an in lieu of service because your provider network is insufficient.
Can you elaborate a little bit on what, I mean, it more or less makes sense, but I mean, in sort of execution, what innovations waiver look like would actually,
Yeah.
well,
All of the services under the innovations waiver.
so really, what this slide is telling me is that the three services, if there were enough savings, then you could de facto create slots to be through the services.
You could, but you have to think about that. You have to think about that in terms of long-term sustainability and other things. But yes.
So, a couple questions then, Matt, a good one here is that you're doing projected savings, and so
Yeah.
projected over how many years? I mean, is this?
Rate setting is annual.
Okay, so this, if a person gets a supported employment fee-free service, they're told this is for 1 year only, renewable if the state decides that the projected savings will still be at that level.
Basically, because this is not an entitlement.
Right. And also, can you explain about the savings piece of this? Is it, I remember hearing something that it wasn't 100% of the savings, but there was a percentage of savings that's supposed to be allotted to the services.
It's a little, I can't give you just a flat, this is the percentage. It's that it's part of the rate setting process, and yes, it is a percentage of the savings, but it's unique to each entity, among other things. And it's based in part on prior utilization, because as we go forward, so rate setting in general, and this is a very high level rate setting, so I'm not an actuary, but the rates are based on a few things, including 3 years of historical spending trend, as well as what we call managed care assumptions. So we look at what we think should be happening. You know, we want to see inpatient come down, we want to see utilization come down. To do that, we have some expectations about what might need to come up. So there's some expectations that go into that algorithm, and it has to be set by an actuary, and we use Mercer for that purpose. And the B3s are involved in that process. And yes, it is a percentage of the now anticipated, because we're very new, it will be realized savings, but it's not a flat 3% kind of thing. Any other questions?
Sorry.
Well,
So an individual will be eligible for these savings based on their Medicaid eligibility period, not whether they're waiting for innovations waiver.
That's correct. They meet medical necessity. I mean, there's medical necessity in the definitions, sure, but they are service definitions like any other, and
But they still need to be authorized by the MCO.
correct.
And so the MCO says there's not the funding
Cindy's
there.
dying back there. Is there anybody serious, Mrs. Taylor had a question, so you can can we wait till the end and for, not for you, for the audience, this is the end, for my piece, and then, there's a community guide, the care coordination stuff, but can we wait until the end of this, and then we'll take questions from the audience? You're dying, you have this right over
It's
there.
just, it's inaccurate. The definition only allows innovations waiver lookalike when they're stepping down from an ICFMR. So it's not for people that are on
that's
the
right.
wait list.
That's a good
So I
point.
just don't want it to be a misinformation to your stakeholder group.
You're right.
There is an absolute prohibition. That's not a new gateway for people to get innovations that have Medicaid.
I did miss that point. Good point, Cindy. Thank you. Sorry. Just
That's
killing
why
you
I'm
like
dying,
that.
because I don't want anybody leaving this room thinking that people can get that they
No,
can't.
you're right. I should have made that clarification. Thank you.
So it's only for people coming out of ICS.
Correct.
It's a DF.
Right.
Yeah.
It says a deinstitutionalization service. Well, hold on just a second. Is there any more questions from the group before we turn to the audience? The lookalike swap.
I just need him to speak up.
So any other questions about either one of our waivers or the rate setting authority or the definitions or any of that kind of thing? Anything we just went over?
So, well, I guess under, it really is going to vary from each MCO. Within that MCO, what savings they've established, and then do they deem how they're going to spend that?
Yes.
So
How much
it's
money they
not-
have, yes. But they do have to offer all of these.
To everybody on Medicaid or to whoever gets authorized?
To whoever requests it and shows medical necessity. And up until, because it is not a thing that I can't think of right now, entitlement, thank you, because it's based on a pot of money, it's up until that pot. Kind of like health choice. Health choice works similarly.
Some determination then, who was most medically necessitated, for these people, or for these people's services.
They send a service request. They would turn somebody would turn in a service request, just like any other service, and if it meets the medical necessity definition of the service, it'll be authorized. I mean, it's handled in terms of the request process. Correct me if I'm wrong, Cindy, since you're here to be my
I'll be
MCA
glad
expert.
to be that person for you today.
But they request it like the service, and if you demonstrate medical necessity, it gets authorized, et cetera. I think the biggest difference probably is that they're not appealed, they're not, because it's not an entitlement, the appeal process is different.
But I think
Very
maybe
similar
there-
to state dollars. So when you
Okay.
get that capitation, you could be the neediest person, but you will not get it if there's no more money.
Well,
Same as
it-
state dollars.
See, that's what I was asking here, is because the way you describe this, it does sound like anybody who meets that medical necessity, gets the services, and so that's what, if we're still limited to this finite pot of money, how's the determination made then? Is it first come, first served, most medically needy?
But let me put it into perspective for you. Nobody's come close to getting their pot. Yes.
Everyone's their savings,
ours are
though.
back.
So when it's time to, I guess, how do you know when the MCO is saying, okay, we've had these cost savings, and we have these services open up? If
Well-
it's based on cost savings, it seems like.
We build it into their budget, the rate setting process, so they each know how much money they have. And then again, when they hit that cap, I think, so let me back up a second. Two things. One thing is that they have to be statewide, so if we were gonna add some additional ones or whatever we were gonna do, we would have to put it in a waiver amendment and get it approved by CMS. So that's the first thing. The second thing, I guess, that I think it's important to note is that we really have been in a growing process. I mean, we achieved a tremendous amount, frankly, in getting all of these programs up in an 18-month period. I mean, it was just an awesome amount of effort. It's crazy just how labor intensive this whole thing has been to do this quickly. exactly. So, and I make that point to say that as we've come up and gone live, there's been a lot of growing and learning about just your basic capitation, how to run a program, how to be a managed care entity, what do our provider networks really look like now that we own them, just a learning and growing process. So the reason for is, and I say that to say that with a lot of these B3 services, there is not a robust provider network for them. They have not received as much attention as some of the other stuff that was needed during the early growing pain process. So we're starting to talk about them now. We're starting to look at them. We're starting to look what they can do. We're starting to see what opportunity we really have here. But they have not been the focus for that first year or so that folks have been in operation. And for good reason, honestly, as they really focused on the really important meat and potatoes of doing this business.
So in the process of authorizing the services, so these are all authorized under the waiver, the D3.
Under the B waiver.
At the same time, there's nothing managing how those services are delivered that is then expected at the other end of the service system. Okay. All these services are available, but we already know by some of our utilization reports that we get that depending upon which MCO you're dealing with, some of them are going to be doing community guides to say, yeah, we're going to spend money on this and invest in this direction. Others are saying, we're not going to do that at all.
Nobody should be saying they're not going to do that at all. And if they are, then we can take a look at that, and we can work on making that network a little more robust.
We probably ought, because again, to say that unilaterally it's not happening probably is, okay, it's a bit of an exaggeration on my part, I apologize.
I live in hyperbole land.
Yeah, that's the world we live in. But at the same time, when you look at the rates of use and where it's being put to work, it's a whole map out there where the services are
question
provided.
that you're probably going to answer. Is this, I mean, are they talking about money per person?
You're right.
And the mobility on the agenda,
They were.
this is something that would be
They
helpful.
were when they were talking about innovations waiver look-alike B3 services. That's money per person kind of stuff, yeah. Why didn't you just say that?
Just this much.
I don't know.
In that we do know
I'm
that.
gonna ask
We have seen that, and we are
They'll
working
take a
on it.
break at some point and you'll be able to.
I would assume that, I would assume that the same thing.
We do, and we do not, I do not dispute with you, but again, it's because of their,
This is just
trying to
and
blow the dust up.
feedback.
But now we're seeing this is an opportunity that's not being used like it could be everywhere, and we absolutely are focusing on
The
that.
advantage is
You're right.
writing a waiver amendment, right?
We're talking a lot about.
And part of that is because of the new CMS
All this
requirement for home and community-based service definition that came down from the feds. So they have to submit that new home and community-based service compliance amendment.
Am I correct?
So they're taking this opportunity to change some of the innovation waiver. So as part of that new CMS home and community-based service requirement that every state, every waiver has to answer, there is now a public comment period before they send the waiver to CMS. And this is it. No, it's after this group and the IDD listening tour. They're going to take all that information. They're going to write the waiver amendment. They will post it for 30 days. And we get to write or call, do whatever to make our views known. Now, then after they get our
Because
public
what we're working
comment,
on here is the C waiver.
they have to explain to
This is
CMS
under the B waiver.
what they
So that's a
did
separate
about
waiver.
public comment.
Okay, so let me just
So
start
they
there.
aren't going to be able to say, well,
Yes, we
we
can certainly
accepted
look
public
at
comment.
B3s and what makes sense, and
They're going to have to say, we
honestly, and I
accepted
don't think
public
Cindy will
comment.
disagree with me,
We
it's
decided
in their
it was
best interest to
trash.
use these.
Or
You
they're
know,
going to
I
say,
mean,
we
the
accepted
more they
public
use them,
comment.
the
We
more
make
some of their
this
historical
change and
spending,
this
the more it'll
change.
show
They
going
don't
forward.
have to, but
You're
they
right, the
don't.
more stabilized people on
They
the
had
wait
to say
list,
was we
the
accepted
less
public
they can
comment
pay on the back end for the
because
higher
that
cost more
happened when
expensive
they
services.
came
So,
with the 40 hours.
I don't even think the MPs don't want to do this, I think it's just.
100 people write and say no 40-hour limit, but they kept it.
Sure, yes.
Because there's no requirement for them to change anything because they have public comment. But now, CMS changed it. If you
Right,
got
okay,
public
yes.
comment,
And-
you
but
have,
just to-
you have
so
to
just be
explain
clear,
to
it's
us
not
what you
affecting-
did
No,
in
I get
response
that.
to
Well,
public
not
comment.
directly.
So they aren't going to be able to tell CMS, you know, we have 12,000 people on the waiver, and we heard from 2,000 families not to put a limit on relative as provider, but we decided we want to keep that limit. So they're going to have to put that out there. So if they put that out there, then we get to go to the legislature. We all wrote, you need to put some legislation in place to stop these people from making that decision. Judy, put your hands last night. Yes, yes, okay. And we made a recommendation. Yes, yes. And I made it. And they better do something. They better do something about it. There's a lot going on. I think we need the Department of Justice. I will call the Department of Justice. It's bad. I'm going to call the Department of Justice.
Penalty, there's no incentive for business to keep the savings, that maybe some of that geared toward marketing is
Did you write that down, Maya? Did you hear?
I'm gonna actually disagree with them a little bit.
just as much.
Because it's not a solution to the wait list, and I think we all know that. And I think there are gonna be some families that a little bit of rest that may some families, but frankly, a lot of families are, you know, they need crisis services, they need consultation, they need pretty intense stuff. And 4 hours of rest is not gonna do that. So when you look at your network, and I know that some of the MCOs are drowning providers in B3 respite, and it's so hard to manage. You know, just a little bit of hours here, it's just different. So I think there's a next level of learning for B3 services too. So a little bit of both. I mean, I think that if we, and I understand I'm not seeing waiver and this thing, but I also know that you're talking about hierarchies, right? So I think it's initially.
Well, I think that sorry, Dave. Well, you were late, so deal. But I think pertaining to the system aspect of it is we would have to get permission to open up the B waiver, and we do not want to send 2 waivers to CMS at the same time. Bad idea, but it is a good thing to have on the back burner thoughts of what we might want to do going forward as far as that goes. And Maya, what he was saying is that we might want to do some marketing around the B3s. And that there is no incentive to not use them, and maybe just what they are, a little more clearly.
And I think some of the MCOs maybe, I know I spoke to some of them, and they were talking about they're going to have somebody start doing that in our area, going to the schools and things like that, as part of community education about what's out there.
And some of them are doing RFIs to try to start building that network, and sure, and I'm sorry, sir.
One day I think, not short term, but long term, I think it's really important to think that, not to think that B3 or other kinds of services could not be used for the wait list. Here's why, because I think the wait list ought not be about waiting for inpatient services. Wait lists ought to be about waiting for services. It ought to be about trying to, that's exactly what I'm saying. We have, in my opinion, we've done an enormous disservice to families and everybody else by making people become expert on every little service definition, every possible thing they say, well, that's not the long-term answer. The answer ought to be, you show up to the entity that is the managing entity, the managed care organization. You have a intellectual development skill, you're eligible for services, and we figure out what is the right funding source for that. It should not be the individual family responsibility to do that. But short term, I get you. But long term, I think we've got to get past that. What we've done now is created a ridiculous process that people are just trying to get that more money.
And I also think it's important for lining that we're not talking, there's no one unilateral solution to this from the other. So, of course, the B3 services are not going to single-handedly fix the labor issue. They're going to need to work in concert with other solutions that we get devised. But certainly seems to be on the road to be at least somewhere to help prevent having
our reviewers call us if we haven't asked for enough services. Because every so often our NCO changes the limits, and if we put in for a SAR in, and we've only asked for 6 hours a week, and then it's been bumped up to 10, then our reviewers will call us and say, hey, you know, you can ask for more, or you can ask for a different service like supported employment or something on top of it. So our reviewers are pretty good about sending it out, and we get updates all the time, so that show the grid, we get a grid that shows exactly how much we can ask for each, depending on their SNAP score. Yeah, it's
That needs to be any other questions about this piece?
Yeah.
From the committee? I know there's some audience members that had a few comments.
It's really nice. The state had a single entry point. Had anybody who was met all the criteria to qualify, enter their name in, their social security number, and be able to identify what services are available, and non-money is available to that person. Stop. Shop.
So we can add that to Maya's notes on communication.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure how to do that, but we can take a look at it.
Wait, I'm just thinking out loud, I'm sorry.
A model that springs to my mind when you mention that first of all, I think it's difficult in execution, but right now we're about the idea. But something that springs to my mind in terms of as an example of where you see that is like cell phone carriers, where you can pull up your account at any given time and see, you know, what your usage is.
See where your service requests are.
Exactly.
What services you're receiving and what services you may be eligible for, and where you are on the waiting list.
And if you don't use it, what they call it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have no idea how you would implement that. You know, but we could cross that bridge when we come to it and just bring up the ideas.
Yeah, no, it's a good, I think we're all scribbling furiously here. I think even Cindy's nodding, so it must be a good idea.
There's a program like that in Colorado, called a web store, and that's the way they use purchase services for their innovation, well, their equivalent flavor through a web store. So you can do it through a mobile app. Boulder.
Just a possible thought, going back to some of my experience over the past few years, if the administration carves out admin budget that says this is what we will spend on administration for all of it, some of it would go down to the MCOs for management, which is part of the deal. But some of that is being spent right now on IT systems that part of the difficulty has, and it's been, everything I've heard says that you go from one system to the next, even if they're using the same IT system, they're using it differently, so it creates that level of confusion that everybody has mentioned. I can't trust the system because I don't know what the rules are, because it changes from place to place. If the system was a single point system that everybody is using it and using it the same way, then having separate MCOs doing whatever it is they do as long as they're playing by the same set of rules. Leastways, it doesn't solve all the problems, but it solves part of that. And collectively, a lot of money is being spent to develop IT systems, taking that resource, pulling it into a single point source. Investing in that from the state perspective, that means that now instead of dealing with the MCO as far as what I'm qualified for and what I may or may not be, instead of dealing with the MCO, now I'm dealing with the state, which is where the funds are coming from in the first place. Management of that goes back to the MCO, which is the way the system is designed.
I think, but I think later on, when we get to the second half, we'll talk about the assistive technology piece of this here. I think that, yeah.
That, again, answers the question of what is available to me, which is one of the good questions.
I think that'll be part of the large, yeah, the larger new, focus on the new world, if you will.
Yeah.
2014, right?
We just turned them on.
So, Dave, a bunch of people around the wall had their hands raised, so we're going to take a few minutes to do public audience?
I'm late, so go
And
ahead.
then move on to care court. Ms. Taylor, thank you for waiting so patiently.
They finally asked me questions and answered my questions. Thank you.
Okay. Ellen?
Is the innovations waiver look like a money part person?
The deinstitutionalization
Yeah.
slot?
There are reserved slots under innovations for money follows the person. I don't see why you couldn't use money follows the person with an innovations lookalike slot. But you would definitely want to utilize all of your waiver slots first before you got into this, because this is more of a finite pool of money.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, we'd encourage anybody who's coming out of an institution to utilize MFP.
Is it like, I mean, is it like what Larry's Slave is doing in the Cardinal Innovations? The Justice Department came in and told them that they had to take, I'm just trying to figure out innovation waiver look like. Is it?
The innovations waiver has slots.
Yeah.
Tell them CMS how many slots we're going to use. The B waiver allows for somebody to have something that looks like that slot without being on the innovations waiver. They have access to that service array, but it's just for folks who are coming out of the institutions, and it would just be if you couldn't support them under the innovations waiver because you didn't have any slots left.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the audience? Did I see Renee come in? So, stand up, Renee. They thought I was making you up, I said. Because she's missed the last couple of, this is Renee Rader, who is sending you stuff, so you can put a face to an email. And also she's been working on the communications stuff that we've been sending out, and she's just missed the last 2 stakeholder meetings. So I just wanted you to see that she's real, and I didn't make her up. So, is it okay with you, sir? We move on to...
I did have one other question now that David showed up.
Believe.
There's only one self-advocate on here, and he doesn't have the real involved in innovations waiver. Can David and Ellen and Chris Perform and some of the others that do have involved, that were involved with the last innovation waiver, can they join this committee?
Happy. Hold on a second. I didn't know it's true or something, you got that.
About Chuck?
Yeah, check.
And don't Chuck.
Okay. We'll come to the highway.
I think we did a good job at trying to get representation from the Concerned Family Advisory Board by asking for that to come through that process. Primarily because what we didn't want to do is they have, one, you can't have too many people. And 2, we wanted to make sure that there was a fair process for a lot of people to get represented. What we haven't done is said when people come to meetings that they're not going to be able to talk. And so I think we would like to keep it right there in terms of the size of the group, but we can surely have additional conversation further.
Well, my concern is, I think several of you raise your hands that are parents. You don't have equality here for people with IDD to represent themselves. And I think it would be nice if you did make an effort to do equality.
I did want to address really quickly with you. First of all, I appreciate the fact that the services that I do receive may not be as involved or as comprehensive as some of the other people in this room. And as such, I may not have as much of a day-to-day understanding of certain aspects of the labor. I will freely admit that there are only, right now, a select few aspects of the labor that I utilize. That's likely to go up within the next few years as certain lifestyle circumstances change and do otherwise. But the other thing that I want to make explicitly clear is that I'm not just here representing myself and my own needs, and while I may not talk directly people sitting in this room, first of all, if anybody wants to get in contact with me about things that they want me to bring up in these meetings, all they have to do is ask me for contact information and contact me, and I will be sure to reflect their needs within the committee. But the other thing that I think is important to remember is that it's been a really big problem in this state, especially over the last little while, where people have sort of formed smaller groups that didn't necessarily, they either didn't collaborate with other people or they didn't believe that other people would be able to effectively collaborate with them or effectively speak to their needs simply because they don't fall under the exact same demographics. And I think we just really need to be careful about thinking that just because any person, whether you're talking about me, whether you're talking about any parent that's around this table, or whether you're talking about any provider that's around this table, I think you need to be really careful if the inference or even the outright statement is that they don't necessarily have the best interests of everybody in mind on the spectrum, no matter what their needs might be. Now, they might not have as much of an understanding, but again, it's totally within anyone's purview to talk to me, and I'm sure anybody else around this table, as far as concerns that you want brought up in these meetings, that would be reflected in future meetings, as long as you let them know that it was something that you wanted to be addressed.
Again, I just ask for equality, have more representation, equally for self-advocacy.
Well, I have a question then. Why wasn't this brought to the DWAC board before, since I'm on DWAC board? This would be interesting to DWAC.
You mean
Chair of the-
presentation?
Yeah, the chair. I think all you have to do is ask the chair to get something that's on there, and I think Margaret would say yes.
Well, we have the next meeting set, but January, we're going to start meeting once a month.
Sure, we can talk to her.
So,
Or offer that
and
option.
this is, I'm on DWAC board, so, and we meet over here. So, I'm just trying to, help.
Sure. Anything else? Can you be the last one, Ms. Short?
Yes, I can.
Next piece.
Whoops. Oh, that's right, the battery's still working. I unplugged it. You mentioned something about the LME-MCOs being able to create in lieu of service definitions, and I thought I heard you say if an LME-MCO did try, because that I kind of implied, no one had tried, that if they were to try to create an in lieu of service definition, it had to be approved by CMS. It wasn't just an LME-MCO process and a DMA-DMH process, but it was a CMS process too?
Well, let's talk, let me clarify that a little bit.
Okay.
We do, right now, let me back all the way up. We've only had one so far. So we're still trying to figure this process out a little bit ourselves.
Which LME-MCO was that?
Yeah.
Cardinal?
Was Cardinal,
Okay.
and it was and we're not even done approving it actually. It's sort of an step down.
So is that,
A better description.
is that described in their contract, the LME-MCO contract about the in lieu of?
No, and I will tell you, it's because we don't have we just found out about it, that this was even an option. Because we were trying to figure out how to be a little more creative with some of the things that we're doing.
Correct.
So this is very, very new. But what we've kind of been educated on is that yes, it comes up to DMA for approval, both on the finance side as well as the clinical side. And again, you have to show what it's in lieu of and how that it's just as safe as and cost effective as such a thing. And we don't have to have each one approved by CMS, but again, we have to do that annual justification to them of how our waivers are cost effective and safe and all the rest of when all of our reporting goes up. That's when they review. So there is a review, but not for each one at the time of application from the MCO. But you have to put at DMA, I have to put on my CMS hat when I look at them.
So it's a little different than being able to do their own rates. Like I ran into 2 years ago with Smokey, and because I didn't want the LME-MCO to spend the money on in-home intensive supports because that seemed like a dumb use of money when all I needed was just the extra PC. And so during the course of all of that, there was a talk about, well, you could have requested in-home supports, but we would have been happy to pay it at the PC rate. So this in lieu of thing could sort of be kind of a run around to kind of get away from that 90-day approval, that high reimbursement rate. I mean, I was just thinking out loud. So am I on the right track or not?
I would just say back to the original point that I was trying to make when we were talking about it before, is that it can't just be because you can't just do it because your provider network is a little limited or because, it's got to be something, basically it's got to be something that's kind of going to be filling a gap in your individual spectrum.
Okay.
We're getting ready to do transition housing.
Which would not.
It's not that.
Not
DOJ.
Under Medicaid, though, yes or no? I'm thinking not, just funding stream-wise, because we can't pay for housing. We're essentially an insurance company.
Well,
Health insurance company.
It's the step down is between coming out of an institution and where we're trying to find them the appropriate, where they appropriately need to be, whether it's a group home or an AFL home, like a 90-day service.
I'm not sure that again. I don't know what your funding stream is, but in theory, sure. From a perspective of a Medicaid service, but that's housing, but the same kind of thing, sure. Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that's one of the actual ones, if you will, the same concept, sure, absolutely. So, I mean, I would just say, in short, at the end of the day, I think you're on the right track. It's a conversation to have with your MCO.
Yeah. Well, and you said it was new, so cool.
Brand
Thanks.
So, it's not a new concept, it's new to us here in North Carolina.
Right, cool.
So if we can move on to care, community guide and care coordination, that would be swell.
Yeah.
You didn't bring what, I'm sorry. Well, I'm thinking, okay, well, what is your pleasure? Do you want to get through these and then we have a break and come back to the definitions? Yeah. Only Deb was. Committees, they're going.
This will be fun. This applies to you. Listen up.
You know what to do.
So, good afternoon. So what me and my colleague Lisa will do is give an overview, very brief overview of care coordination, or community guide versus care coordination. What I'll do, the piece I'll do is what is community guide, the roles and responsibilities between the care coordinator and the community guide. Lisa will finish up with more roles and responsibilities and then talk about how that service works and how it works in conjunction with other services. So what are community guides? Purpose of the service is to promote self-determination, increase independence, enhance the ability to interact and contribute to a person's So some of the other things entailed in community community guide services. Assist the person in developing social networks and connections with their local community. Emphasize, promote, coordinate the use of natural and generic supports, and i.e. family, generic neighbors, church members. Support beneficiaries when self-directing services. Community guide supports beneficiaries and managing employers. We shall talk a little bit more about self-direction and community guide. So, you look at the roles and responsibilities, and as you can see, they're kind of broken out. They don't match, like if I read one, it doesn't automatically match the other side, but under care coordinator, ensures beneficiaries receive all needed assessments, and i.e. like a psychological evaluation. This is under the care coordinator. Explains the individual budget, and that's what we're all moving towards, the whole resource allocation. Develops the individual support plan, or ISP. Assists the beneficiary in choosing service providers and referring to providers. Works directly with providers as needed to ensure that the person's needs are met. And then on the community guide side, when it comes to the ISP, they support individuals preparing for the meeting, participating and implementing the ISP and other types of plans. They may also discuss available natural, unpaid, and community supports, discuss potential service needs, and then they assist the person in preparing information to be shared during the planning meeting. Okay, some other roles and responsibilities. The care coordinator will monitor services and identify gaps in services. So they assure that linkages to healthcare systems such as the primary care physician. Refers the person to and arranges group home or alternative family living, or what we call ADLs. And on the community guide side, they will inform the care coordinator of the beneficiary's health and safety issues or needs, so they wouldn't be doing the actual linkage. They'll assist in locating options for renting or purchasing, and that is a big difference between the care coordinator. The care coordinator is dealing with those more licensed, service-oriented facilities, and we're looking at fair market out in the community if the person wants to live independently. And they assist with purchasing furnishing for the personal residence. Continuing on with roles and responsibilities, they coordinate, the care coordinator coordinates referrals to services such as your MHDD, SAS providers, PT, OT, speech. They obtain the letters for medical necessity for equipment and supplies, and if the person needs diapers or any other way to need supplies, that's under the care coordinator. On the community guide side, they will assist the beneficiary in locating and assessing non-Medicaid community supports and resources. And Lisa will give a good example of that when she does her presentation. Attends the IEP plan meetings and assists beneficiary family advocating for school services. They can assist with emergency housing issues, i.e., they have no heat or electricity issues, advocacy and collaborating with other individuals and organizations on behalf of the individual. And that concludes my piece of it. I know it's already been kind of fast, so if you have any questions before Lisa takes over with continued roles and responsibilities.
I just have, it's not so much a question as it is a comment, because as those of you in these meetings know, but those who don't, I've done some work with Centerpoint in trying to better understand their usage of community guide. Everything that's laid out here actually makes a lot of sense, and I can see how it would work in execution. But I think there needs to be more provider education on how it works, and also if we're going to have it be a service that the initial idea, at least in my understanding behind care coordination and community guide working in tandem, is that those services in tandem were meant to essentially fill the role of case management used to fill, which makes a lot of sense to me. I totally get that. But between provider education and a really not satisfactory reimbursement rate,
You said that so gently.
I do my best. There are not a lot of providers that even understand the service, and those that do don't provide it very well. So that's something probably.
Any other questions?
I wasn't able to hear everything,
Oh, I'm sorry.
but it's okay because I think what I was getting was the same, my observation, I mean, what I've experienced working with some of the community guide is that it's not being serviced as, or, I'm not, he's not receiving services.
We think you're right, so honestly, in different places, there's different understandings and different, and so one of the things that we'd like for this group to help us do is figure out how to improve that, absolutely. It's not been consistent, so I think education definitely will be, yeah, so, yep.
I think we want to wait till we finish the presentation.
I don't think you'll remember if you wait to the end, and it's very simple. You need to educate everybody, because some people talk about educating providers, some talk about educating NCOs. Nobody talks about educating self-advocates and families. Everybody needs to be trained on the same documents.
All right.
And it's different, with self-direction.
It is
very
I think the part that's coming up next.
This is,
You're right, they play a bigger part.
yeah.
I'm going to finish up on what Monica started about the roles and responsibilities.
I can't hear you.
Okay, oh, okay.
Yeah, let them.
Okay, I've got a seat here, so I've got to hold it a little bit far out. The care coordinator really provides the orientation for individual and family directed supports. The community guide is going to get into more detail around this. They will provide a deeper level of instruction on the individual and family directed supports option. They will also provide ongoing information and support if an individual chooses to self-direct. The community guide will assure the employers and representatives that they have a good understanding of the self-direction responsibilities. The community guide will also share information on recruiting and hiring, training, managing, and evaluating staff. They will also schedule and outline staff duties, and they will provide guidance with the management of the individual and family budget, with a focus on use of the approved services and refer requests for additional funds to the care coordinator. So as you think about this, the community guide's relationship with the care coordinator is very critical in the success of how this whole process is delivered. The community guide services at work. This is an example of how a community guide will actually be able to help someone and actually be a work in progress. The community guide will get to know the beneficiary, and they find out, for example, that they want to apply for food stamps. So they being the community guide, will let the care coordinator know about this. So there's that more upper level of communication going on. And so then the community guide gets more into the weeds with this process, and they actually help the beneficiary apply for the food stamps. The community guide will continue on in this process to educate the beneficiary about how to use the EBT card, which is the card they will get that has their food stamp along, and they will train them how to use that, and will educate the beneficiary on how to get recertified for food stamps. So as you can see with this slide, it's more of an in the weeds with the individual at a deeper level than what you have with the care coordinator, who is more at the top level with the linking and the monitoring. Okay,
I
now.
think they have a question.
Going back one slide, you had community guide responsibilities information on recruiting, hiring, managing, training, evaluating, and maintaining staff. What does information mean?
Well, I think that would be the community guide's role in talking more about self-directed supports and
So
how.
is the community guide recruiting, hiring?
I'm sorry, as I jump in because you're not facilitating that. If the individual is self-directed and needs assistance with, how do I reach out, how do I find a staff member? The community guide will talk to them about, you can advertise in the newspapers, you can advertise on Craigslist, you can talk to people that you know who might be interested in providing services. So they're going to be kind of the person who is doing that education and supporting is the person who learns how to self-direct their own services. People are going to need different levels. You also have community guides are allowed to be with agencies with choice as well. So they would be assisting in that process too, as far as not just employer of record, but agency with choice self-direction. So did I just confuse it more?
No.
Can I go home now? Thank you.
She's got a question.
I am the only self-advocate in this state on self-correction now, self-correction model, as far as I know. So, I know that your community guides don't do this stuff.
And then that's something that we need to shore up.
Yep. So, and that's, since I have a community guide, can you send me this presentation?
We'll share the presentation with you, and as a side note, in the self-direction portion of community guide, a lot of, you have the ability to do that as an hourly rate and not as a monthly rate.
So let's let Lisa finish. Are we finished?
Okay, how these services work together. Another example is that, let's say the community guide learns that the beneficiary wants to volunteer at the local animal shelter. So they would again inform the care coordinator of the beneficiary's desire to volunteer there. The community guide would help the beneficiary by finding the animal shelter, finding out what requirements there are for volunteering, and then the care coordinator then would take that information and fill that in and revise the ISP to include that person's desire to volunteer at the animal shelter. So that's another example. And two, this also helps the beneficiary become a more active member of their community in this example, because they're actually getting out there, enriching their life, they're adding new relationships and improving their life and membership in the community.
So does the beneficiary then have to contact the animal shelter and ask about volunteering, or does the coordinator or guide assist them through that?
The coordinator and guide should be assisting them through the process. And if I can just take a step back and give a little framework to this presentation based on last time's conversation, there was confusion. The reason why we're doing this is because there was some confusion about what the roles and responsibilities were of both of these functions. Even based on these listening tours, I don't think there's any disagreement that it's not consistent across the state. Absolutely. So it was just to make sure that everybody understands what the intent is for these two. Right. This is what it should look like. And we know that it's not in some places for whatever various reasons. So in addition to education, how do we get there? And do we need to change this? But on paper, this is what it's supposed to be.
In some places.
It is.
I really hate, I'm sorry, it's done. I hate to interrupt you, but I was just, is there an overlap of services here? Like in my son's case, he sings services. So I find that if he needed this, sometimes his worker, his direct care provider, and he will move on and do this. So you're not really needing the community guide person at that time. So what about the overlap of services or?
with other service definitions. There is, I mean, obviously there is in some cases. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, that's part of the, I think she's got one more slide.
Sure,
Maybe we can, but maybe, I think that's probably part of your discussion of how we want to move forward. Is there, and because one of the things that you hear consistently, loud and clear, if he's listening to her, is that we need targeted case management, because the functions of the target, we need that to come back, because those functions aren't being fulfilled. So part of the reason to kind of think about this is based on what's expected, is that true? And if that is true, then what do we do about it? Or is it a case of things not being consistently implemented like they should be? I don't know, I mean, that's a question.
My last slide, I think, is probably the most critical. The takeaway slide in this section is about the importance of the community guide's role in forming and sustaining a full range of relationships for the beneficiary with natural and community supports, and helping that person to expand their social relationships and build connections within their local community. Any other questions?
Recourse as a beneficiary of the community fund is able to fulfill its responsibilities.
They can fire them.
Yeah.
Couple items.
I said, and that's with any staff. I mean, if they're not fulfilling the duties of the service that they provide, you want to first talk with their supervisor or provider agency, let them know the issue, see if you can get another community provider. If the issue is with the staff person themselves, if the issue is with the service, as we can hear today, then there's issues with the service as a whole. So that's a separate issue. But at any time that a staff is not living up to their expectations, you always have those.
Well, that goes back to the educational part. A lot of times the consumer doesn't realize he's got these benefits, and the guide is not telling him and not doing it because the guide's not doing the job.
Well, and I think that goes into looking at the definition that you guys did send out that has the requirements of the position, and it being basically a paraprofessional position. That maybe one of the things to look at is, does this not maybe need to be more of a VP level position that allows for ability to get in there and do these things to a higher level standard that is expected to do this type of work and to do the coordination and truly do the things the way the definition is intended. I would say that is one of the big roadblocks.
One idea that I have in my discussions with friends is, well, first of all, let me just say that another one of the problems is that there are not that many providers of community guide service around the state. Obviously, that's an execution problem. That's not a systemic problem in itself. Well, it's a chicken and egg thing, but the point is that could be solved without changing the service definition. Anyway, something that I talked about with Centerpoint, because we addressed the issue of the qualifications of a community guide under the current service definition, and how certain people would probably need to be more qualified in certain areas in order to fulfill the duties of the community guide as laid out in that service definition. One of the potential solutions that I came up with in my discussion with Centerpoint, feel free to do whatever you want with this idea, agree with it, throw it out, whatever, but I looked at it as, I think one of the biggest flaws that you could possibly have in trying to have a community guide-like service is expecting one person to be able to do all of those things. And so my idea was to, under the community guide umbrella, look less at, okay, here's a person in this area that can do all this, here's a person in that area that can do all this, and look at it more as allow people to, almost look at it more as like who has the expertise in this particular area of the community guide service that we can use as a provider, and not expect one community guide to do everything, but look at it more as like a team service, which would also allow for the ability of paraprofessionals to provide some of the aspects of community guide. Because I do like the idea of it being a position that is more open to people that might not have the same amounts of education. At the same time, there are aspects of the service with which that wouldn't necessarily be appropriate. And so I thought that maybe by using that sort of team approach, then you would be addressing that issue, which is a problem, but not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. But that was just mine.
I'm sorry?
Providers have that flexibility there.
Mm-hmm.
You'd have to probably amend the definition.
If we're looking at taking the system we have within the boundaries that we're given, which is reasonable, and not, rather than recreating the wheel, but working within the framework that we have, it seems to me that where the conversation continues to be, and I haven't heard anybody from any direction saying that this is not part of the conversation, to look at a community guide-like service, can we take what or a case management type service, can we take what case management is being done right now within the MCO and ask the question, of those functions, what really could be done by anybody but the MCO? Because I acknowledge there needs to be at some level a certain amount of something that goes on at the MCO level to function in that capacity. And there's a point of interface that has to occur, and that's that interface on the MCO side. But anything outside of that, and right now the assumption is, before was, it all goes to an independent person. With the change to the LME MCO, it all went into the MCO system. Why can't we take what is being done by the LME MCO, separate out anything that really is not essential to the LME MCO function? And that now becomes open for a discussion as to what we do next. We can now take, and I like the idea of a collaborative where, because things are so complex, to ask somebody to understand all pieces of the system requires a lot of time and a lot of energy. We can do some specialization as long as those specialists in, for instance, one aspect of care has the ability and knows that, I've got a person sitting next to me or in the office next door that I may not have the answers, but I know where to go to get the answer, and we can get you what you need in an immediate fashion. But to have that collaborative be established based on what the MCO cannot do or doesn't have to do.
We used to have a collaborative like that. The IAC model really did do that in the local areas. It was especially in different areas, came around the table once a month and looked at different cases. And yeah, the interagency council, it really, it was an all-day thing, and I hated to, once a month to have to do that, but it was so beneficial. We really made some really good strides, I think, in that process, and then it went away, as things changed. So something in that kind of model, though, of the expertise coming together.
I think it's almost two separate things we're talking about. One is thinking about is something.
Well, the question is, what goes into that collaborative type approach? Anything that the MCO doesn't have to do by design.
Well, I think
to be opened up.
The question. Go back to what is the problem you're trying to solve? You got to start there. So if the issue is that, and forget about who does what. Stop. So what I think we've heard across time in the listening sessions, and what I've heard is that people don't feel that there is a real, often there isn't a real person sitting in front of being about it. And from the provider perspective is that because the short-term goals are being required at the provider level of doing that work that they've never been paid for, and so it creates that. And then there's this disconnect between what the long-term goals at the care coordination level are being done and what happens. So that's one issue. And then we hear, we're missing the advocacy. What we gotta say is that you can't, case management it's not supposed to be doing advocacy. You can't do that way. Community guide can do some advocacy work around here. But what I tell you is the system, one of the things that we want to make sure that's happening is that if we're using a service system to do advocacy, the advocacy is around how do you advocate for, my bias about national supports, I think that's a lie. There is no such thing. You have to organize to get those supports to go. And so that advocacy really is about navigating that other world to pull together those national supports. So I think that what keeps going on in my head, there are a couple of functions that we talk about. Now, I also believe that, the conversation we're going to start having in probably a week or the next couple of weeks around individual budgets plays into this. So on the innovations waiver, we have an individual budget. How much of that budget is it worth for an individual family to buy some of these navigators? I mean, I think one question there is really important. And people might want to use some of their budget to buy them. The other side of it is that there's been a long-standing assumption you don't want the provider who's doing your service writing this individual plan. But I hear from other people that they really like their provider doing that. There's a choice option. People can opt in and out. You say, I'd rather have somebody totally independent, like the person that plan for me, get fed into the other process that the NDSA. Or I'm really comfortable with provider, I'd rather them do it. I'm okay with that. I think one of the points that if you're going to go to a team approach or have the ability for that, you can't pay for this service as a $150 an hour
a month
service. You have to create the ability for organizations to basically self-capitalize that with a managed care organization. I think if you did that, you probably could get that expertise. But it's a volume question. So to me, there are a lot of functional questions that you can ask along this line. But we've got to get back to what is the problem we're trying to solve? Not are we looking for an answer to something that is just a sort of amorphous thing that's out there. But I think that's what we keep hearing. The plan question is a big deal. The navigating role that can be played at the community level, that is probably not where care coordinating goes. And then some other functional issues in there. But if we can begin to think about those, I think we can kind of flip from where we're at.
I think it gets back to the basic question though, what's missing from those that we just discussed? Is anything missing, or is it just a question of implementation?
I think it's a question of implementation. I mean, we were talking earlier about we wanted to tweak these definitions so that they do more what we need to be doing, but looking at what we've got on paper, we've got the wheel created, we just can't seem to get it onto the axle. I mean,
Hello.
we've got good stuff here, but it's not being done. And I don't know why, are the NCOs not monitoring it? I mean, my company does D3 services, we get monitored like nobody's business for all the stuff we do, but apparently this is not being monitored, people are doing shoddy service and with their repercussions.
What's missing? The crosswalking maternity is old, literally, the oldest maternity on the side of what's missing?
Well, how much time is somebody authorized? I mean, I think that was one of the issues with community guide too, is that it's very limited time and funding for that service, right? Is it like 2 hours a month?
Yeah, and then it gets a plan update signed by the care coordinator, and then you have to wait on the authorization, and it's very brief. So as providers, a lot of times, like she's saying, if they're looking for a volunteer job and that kind of thing, we just end up doing it all. It's not that we don't have a community guide, because we offer the service at my office, but it's just the time, I guess it's not worth the time taking in to get all those pieces together, and then you have to wait for the authorization.
That's a function issue, that's a process issue, right? A system design question. So if the service were readily available without all of that other authorization, you might see more use of it. It becomes a question of cost. What's the level of that?
But as far as limits go, that's something that certainly can take a look at.
It's kind of not everybody at one time. Somebody, one provider being able to manage that. I mean, it's somebody who's going to do 40 hours of community, but it's like 40 hours key in care situation. And then somebody who just needs help
We can't
with
hear
the
back
referral.
here.
Just speak
The
up.
amount of hours, the differential, the amount of hours, it's hard to manage.
We're talking about how time and rate might be the biggest issue. I think is particularly looking at the specialization approach, you set the system up. Specialization
John?
will occur just.
I can't hear.
Specialization will occur just because the agency's providing that resource. And if I'm looking at that and saying, okay, I've got 10 people providing that type of service, I want my 10 people, you know what, why don't you focus and know this part better than everybody else so that when something like this comes out, the person sitting next to you is going to say, hey, how do we do this? And so that will occur, I think, naturally, just as a function of business that says, how do we make this more efficient for us, for our bottom line? I mean, we have to be able to meet the requirements under the funding we have available, and specialization is a natural result of that, so it becomes more of solve the problem and the symptoms begin to fix themselves. And I agree with you, go back to the original core, what is it we're trying to fix here?
And
If the services are lacking,
Yeah.
then let's go back and address those issues and see, hopefully, the rest will begin to fix itself.
As you look at all of these services, including you guys, anything else that we look at, you might want to think about them as you're thinking about redesign in terms of things like utilization management guidelines. So if you're going to go to an individualized service where people get to pick and choose a little more, you know, what their plan is going to look like, do we want to control things from the request end? So do we want to have these strict guidelines of 2 hours a month or what, you know, whatever? Or here's your individualized budget, here are your services, what can you do within that? So that's something to think about as we go through these, if that makes sense.
Kind of like what they were talking about in the webinar yesterday about no matter what your budget is or what your level is, there is room for extended add-ons just looking at your specific situation.
And that is so, and you know, a lot of the utilization review guidelines that we have in a lot of our services are in there because they were in a fee-for-service model. And we were trying to control on the front end through the process. In managed care, you don't have to do it necessarily that way, so it's system redesign. But that means that some of these definitions might be a little antiquated for your current model.
That was delicately put.
So, any other thoughts about this right now? It sounds like maybe what we need to do is come back and look at that care. We probably need to talk about education is what I'm hearing and what we need to do to educate, but also maybe, you know, I know we've got two definitions for later on, but also look at this, look at that definition next time, the community guide definition of what needs to happen with that. We could probably spend an entire session on just community guide.
Yeah, and I think it's an education issue. I can't remember how it's set up. It's not that far as community guide as a whole, but I think once you come onto the waiver, aren't you some of those do automatically get signed with community guide? Is that right?
No.
That's care coordinator.
Yeah, it's care coordinated.
So I think there's something to think about, like when would it be an important service not to encourage? And if we're going to hold individual resource things,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like, this is when you might need it when you come into the system to help you understand and navigate.
And one other legitimate point you made is that it may be a very different look of what we want for community guide, or whatever you call those things, whatever, that have a innovation waiver slot versus people like that. I think in many cases, the free side of this, if you're not receiving services of community guide, may be the bridge to keep you at least linked to stuff so that you are in that waiting time to go.
Right, and I think that's where I've seen it in our community used more, so the state-funded side versus innovation.
One thing that is implicit in what you say is any change we make should be something that facilitates recruitment, effective recruitment, because that's what we're talking about. Putting people in places that actually work, the maintenance model.
Confidence is needed.
So here's just one other thing to say, and this is a question that would really be helpful for you guys to do this. There is I bet if I asked everybody in here, especially from the provider side, to say, do you want us to be really prescriptive about the quality of staffing with those outcomes or the kind of staff you want to hire? Or do you want us to trust the fact that you're quality providers and you can make those decisions? I bet every provider would say, well, we'd like you to trust us and make those decisions. But as we begin these conversations, what winds up happening, people say, we want these competencies listed, we want these things down here, which is the opposite of what we often talk about. So I think that it is a balance act there, and I think that's one of the things that we want to continue to remind each other of, is that if we really believe that it's person-centered, if we really believe we want to design things around what individuals need, the more prescriptive we get, the less chance that happens. So there might be some minimum stuff we want to put in there, but I think we want to be real cautious about how far we go.
Was there any other comments from the audience? Yes, Ms. Allen?
But there is one thing that you all have to remember. Self-correction is another beast. You have to have a community guide with self-correction. That's the only, and if I didn't have to have the community guide, it'd be great. But I do, so.
Anything else? Do you guys want to take like a 10-minute break and come back with these definitions?
So